pardon me. Just want to say that I'm always happy to be here. This is a place in the world that has much beauty, and I've come to meet many of you, and so it feels like being with a gathering of family. So thank you for having me again. What I wanted to talk about today kind of came out of a conversation that I had with a man that I met. He was a fellow honoree at the 100th anniversary of the Gandhi Ashram. His name is Jerry White. Jerry is a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Very big guy, comes from an Irish Catholic family in Boston. Likes to tell stories, if you can imagine. But when he was in his 20s, early 20s, he went to Israel because he had an interest in ancient Hebrew and ancient biblical texts. So he went there to study, and while he was there, he was camping in the Golan Heights. And they didn't have any signs up in the area that they were camping, and they were in a landmine area. So he literally blew off part of his leg. And then together, he and Princess Diana started an international campaign against landmines, which led to them winning the Nobel Peace Prize. So when I met Jerry, we had this rather bizarre and interesting conversation. He told me that every day he talks to the ancestors. And the ancestors are people like the people who made the atom bomb. He was worried about North Korea at the time. I didn't mention this, but under Obama, he was the Deputy Secretary of State. So he had a big role in the government. Well, he was telling me that every day he prayed to the ancestors, and he basically asked them to clean up their own mess. You know, you people who made the bomb, do something about it. Clean it up, right? So that was his daily prayer. That's how I met him. And that was the first thing he started talking to me about. He did not know anything about me or what I do. And then I told him, and he was like, which led to a lot of conversations. But one of the things that happened was we started to have a conversation. He asked me to talk with him. We talked on Skype, video conferencing. Turned into a 4-hour conversation. And the conversation was, what do you think is poverty? And the reason he was asking this question was he was offered a huge grant, $18 million grant to address poverty in the world. And he didn't want to do it because he didn't want to do the same old thing that's always been done. And he was questioning, well, how do we even define poverty? And that's a question I would put out to all of us. What is poverty? Well, I know poverty in the sense that, I grew up impoverished because of medical bankruptcy of my parents. Grew up in a slum, had days without food, definitely know what hunger feels like. I know what it's like to have to wear somebody else's clothes because that's all you can have. But I don't remember feeling poor. So did that mean that we were poor? Were we in poverty? It's a question. Certainly we didn't have much. And secondly, my father was a very strange man anyhow. As poor as we were, and as often as we never had food on the table, my father was always finding people who were poorer than us. And we would have a feast and feed these people as honored guests. Many of them were of questionable character, but it was interesting, that his belief was that no matter how poor you are, you're always welcome to get. And that is something that I've experienced all over the world. As many of you know, I work with Syrian refugees. It's my 8 years now in working with Syrian refugees. It'll never end, unfortunately. As I speak, there's 2.5 million people, new people in Syria getting ready to flee for Turkey. So it's an unending trauma. But when I first started working with refugee families, the first thing you do is you go and you talk to them. You learn about what they're going through. You want to understand what their needs are. You know, my expertise is in working with trauma and helping people heal from trauma, but, you know, we just wanted to go and listen. And these people were living in tents or bombed out rooms with no windows and, you know, no power. And the first thing that would happen, even though they had nothing, was they'd feed me, because I was a guest, which meant they would bring out tea, and they would bring out something that they still had of food. And I, of course, would have to try to beg off, but then recognize the importance of receiving. And that dynamic, which I always address in the same way, which is I find a hidden way to get food to the people that have greeted me. But I've seen that dynamic all over the world. When I was working with AIDS orphans and child soldiers in South Africa and Zimbabwe, same thing. No food, but they put out a big feast. And what I learned was that if I didn't eat much, then all the rest of it would go to the children. So I just learned to just eat a little bit and talk about how wonderful it was and go on and on and on, and then, you know, then the rest would go to the children. But is that poverty? That's the question. Is that really poverty? Because they still have something of the spirit, something in them. So when I talked with Jerry, you know, we went through the whole thing of some people think poverty is not having enough knowledge. And if only give them enough education and skills, they can lift themselves out. Well, that has proven not to really work very well. Then there's some who think that they have bad character, that they're mentally ill or have bad character, so they need spiritual guidance. So that's another form of poverty that gets presented. For some, it might, or that they need treatment, trauma treatment. That's the new thing now. We've got to give everybody trauma treatment, because if everybody's not traumatized, then they can work themselves out. I'm saying that a bit pejoratively, but I don't mean it in a bad way. I'm just saying that the truth is we're all wounded in some way, and we all have to find our own ways of keeping ourselves moving. So another one, of course, is lacking materials. You don't have any wealth, so if we give people guaranteed income or some sort of support, that will lift them up. And that, of course, is moderately true. And then the last one, because I'm trying to remember all my notes of what I wrote to myself. The last one is the one that we hear about a lot these days, which is you belong to a group that's oppressed. And so if we have social justice, if we can end racism, if we can end genocide of Native people, if we end whatever the ism is through social justice, that will eliminate poverty. And all of those have some merit. I don't want to dismiss those. But the main reason I'm kind of talking about this is that when I was talking with Jerry, it really turned into a conversation about that I really would see poverty as something of the spirit. If our spirit feels poor, then we are poor. We're not able to share ourselves. We're not able to share our gifts. We're not able to find what we need inside to overcome. And that's something that often doesn't get talked about. And you have to pardon my voice today. I'm fighting a cold. It might not be a cold. It could be the environment, because the air is particularly dense right now because of the fires in Canada. So if you've been noticing the haze that we've been having, supposedly that's all from up north. But as I'm speaking, one of the things that I think is true is that we're in a time right now when to deal with spiritual poverty from the viewpoint of a shaman. I don't call myself a shaman because that's a community designation, but it's certainly something that I practice. The shaman is someone who's wounded, and in that wounding becomes open to spirit, to God, and the God energy. And rather than separating themselves by becoming an expert, I'm married to a physician, and we're used to thinking of doctors as being expert healers, but shamans don't separate themselves from the world. That what affects all of creation affects them. They're not separate from it. And that's a different way of thinking. And in those traditions, it always becomes about how do we heal our relationships. So one of the things that I did was I started, because a conversation with Jerry White goes like this. Very unintegrated. But I came up with 4 things that I think are indicators of poverty of spirit. And just for your insight, one of them is a poverty of not being able to be spiritually intimate, to connect with the larger source. To be so caught up in the materialism of the world and the survival of the world that you're not able to connect with the sense that we're all connected, and that we have a sense of that we're part of this creation and that we've come here for some reason, for some purpose. And that our relationship with God or the Creator, or whatever word you like to use, is of importance in how we bring ourselves into the world and how we live and how we share our gifts. Then there's the poverty of being, where we're so caught up in ourselves, like some leaders that we have right now, that they almost become false gods of their own. They're so caught up in their own God complex and the power that they have that they forget that they're part of something bigger. And also, when we're down on ourselves, when we don't treat ourselves as sacred, when our self-esteem is just, well, in that sense, there's a poverty of being. The third one that came up in the conversation was the poverty of community. Here, many of you I've seen many times over. You have a community, you know each other, you support each other. You share your concerns about your day-to-day lives, you share about your families, you share about your community, about the world that we live in, and your concerns. But in the truth of America in particular, since this is the country we live in, is that over the last 100 years, we have been disconnecting more and more and more from community life. And so 100 years ago, even in my childhood, a common thing was you'd be sitting on your stoop at your house, and people would be walking by, and everybody stops, and you talk, and maybe you have a beer or a cup of coffee or whatever you're drinking, and people would hang out, and you knew all your neighbors, and you knew the people around you. Now, if I ask the question in a lot of places that I go, if you know your neighbors, I would tell you that 90% of people would say no. You know, and so our membership in community has just increasingly decreased. And yet, you know, the shamanic viewpoint of life really is that everything is interconnected. It's always about relationship. You're always in community. You're in community with everyone here, your community with the earth, the sky, the plants, the animals, the elements. Well, we're always in relationship, always in community, and we have a sense of where we fit in there. Which gets into the last one, the poverty of stewardship. Why are we here? You know, we've been given this amazing world. It's beautiful. There's beauty everywhere. I've been blessed to have traveled a lot. Never would have thought that I'd go from where I started to where I am. But we live in an amazingly beautiful world. And we've been given everything that we need. And yet, we operate as if that's not true. So, for example, homelessness in this country is growing. It's been growing. It's getting worse. We're going through another wave of it. There are cities where it's not affordable to live anymore. I'm worried, for example, about my youngest son and his, my daughter-in-law to be, because I don't think they're going to be able to afford to buy a house in Madison, Wisconsin. Well, it's getting too unaffordable, and that's happening everywhere. Where are these people going to live? Where they can live with good old mom and dad. Mom would be very happy. But the truth is that it's getting harder because everything's gotten, the disparities are getting so big. And it wouldn't even surprise me that that's true here in a smaller town, that it's getting too much disparity into how will the young people make it. In Europe, where there's such high unemployment for very educated youth, most of them have to live at home because they don't have jobs for them. So it's causing all sorts of change. But in this country, there are so many empty buildings and empty homes. There are more than enough empty apartments, empty homes, empty buildings to house everybody in the United States and a few million more. Isn't that bizarre? I mean, I think it's bizarre. And of course, the political will may not be there, but my point being is that we have what we need if we allocate it, if we get creative. So, sorry for the little bit of disruption here, but one of the things about when you're not in poverty of spirit, you do learn to be creative. You learn how to work with things, how to connect. I always like to tell this story. When I was an undergraduate at Indiana University, I had 5 undergraduate majors. I kept changing every other week. So I ended up with enough credits for 5 majors, which was fun, because I love to learn. But I had to declare a primary major, so my primary major was sociology and Middle Eastern studies. So, so I had this very unusual professor. He took 35 undergraduate students to Southside Chicago, gave us $5, dropped us off and said, bye, for 2 days. Now $5 even back then was not a lot, but so what happened? Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't pretty. For me, it was glorious. Went to restaurants, said, hey, you got any food you're going to throw out? I'm eating gourmet food. I meet these young women, you know, I was young. Befriended them. They said, oh, we have a couch, you can sleep on our couch. Had a room, you know, a place to sleep, food in my belly. I went begging for money. So by the time I left, I had something like $75. I had housing, food, and had a bath, right? Most of the others who had never ever had to struggle or deal with anything fell apart, completely fell apart. And the university, of course, ended that practice. It never happened again. But the reason I'm talking about it is because part of what I think the challenge of our time is to remember our resiliency. We've forgotten how resilient we are as people. We've become so caught up in identity and who we are and what our victimization might be or what our concerns might be, that we've forgotten just how resilient and strong we really are and how creative we are. This country was built on resiliency and creativity. And there's a lot of beauty in the mythology of this country. And there's a lot of darkness too. But the point of it is, it's important to remember those things. Now when I was growing up, some of you have heard the stories of my great aunt, but one of the things my great aunt always said to me was, whatever you do, hang out with people who shine. Because she knew, you know, I was poor and things were tough and there was a lot of anti-Semitism where I grew up. I saw Black Klansmen last night as well. It certainly took me down memory lane, but so one of the people that I hung out with was a woman named Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith, who told me I should call her Grandma, that she was Grandma to me, was from Mississippi. She was a Black grandmother. She had 13 grandchildren. All of them were living in a little 800 square foot house. Because that's what I grew up into, little 800 square foot house. So 13 children, 4 adults, 5 adults actually, all in one little itty bitty space. And yet they were happy in spirit. I mean, they had their struggles and there was race issues and all that, but they were happy. And she shined on me, and of course I spent a lot of time hiding out there because it was better to be there than some of the other places that I had to be. But I think it's important, the only reason I'm sharing this is because I wanted to invite all of you to think about who made a significant impact on you, helped you when you most needed it, or influenced you when you most needed that influence, who maybe showed you something that helped you along the way, because I was hoping that we'd have a little time for people to talk with each other about those kind of issues, and who taught you things about resilience. And well, I know there's other things that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to maybe I'll talk about them after we have a little time. I'd like to just invite you to form groups of 4 or 5 people and just quickly share some stories with people that helped you in the ways I was talking in terms of teaching you about resiliency or teaching you about something that was very important to you. So let's just do that for a few minutes.